The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.
The Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek Trust, supporting arts, history, science, and this program on KPTS.
This is the place for interesting discussions, where the movers and shakers of South Central Kansas come to share their stories. Today, meet the man behind the music. Don Reinhold heads up one of Wichita's longest-running and highest-profiled fine arts organizations. He took the reins of the Wichita Symphony Orchestra in 2012, and his qualifications were impressive. Reinhold spent his formative years in the Big Apple, where he learned from some of the greatest composers and performers in the world. He went on to lead orchestras in College Park, Maryland, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and Fresno, California, before landing in the Air Capital. With the Wichita Symphony, Reinhold is responsible for a $2 million budget and finding ways to keep classical music relevant in a time of rapidly changing tastes and technology. We'll find out how he does it, what's in store for the future of fine arts in Wichita, and what makes him such a great fit for Kansas. Sit down and enjoy the discussion. Don Reinhold goes one-on-one right now. Welcome to this week's edition of One-on-One. I'm Victor Hogstrom. It's a delight to have Wichita Symphony's CEO, Don Reinhold, with us. Welcome to the program, Don.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You have traveled all over the world, the country, living in various parts of the country, working with symphonies. Who is Don Reinhold?
Well, that's a pretty good question. You're right. I have traveled around the country in different posts over the last, 40 years. But who am I? I guess a good answer to that, Victor, is that I was a kid who got turned on to music at a very early age. Through public schools, having an opportunity to get music lessons in school with an actual music teacher 2 or 3 times a year, having the opportunity growing up in central New Jersey to go to New York at an early age to see the symphony, the opera, the ballet, and having parents that sort of encouraged that love. So one thing led to another. I started piano lessons, and here I am, many, many years later.
So in your growing up days, did you plan to become a CEO of a symphony?
No, definitely not. This is sort of my second career in some ways.
And what was the first?
Well, I think the first was I wanted to be a pianist.
Uh-huh.
Whether that meant being a concert pianist or a university professor, I'm not sure. But as I worked through that part of my career, I taught for several years. At a campus of the University of Maryland system, and then eventually decided that I might have more opportunity and a steadier paycheck by trying out the administration. And so it was around 1986, shortly before the birth of our daughter, that I decided I needed to start a real job, so to speak. And so I started working at the University of Maryland, coordinating something that was called the William Capell International Piano Competition and Festival. And I mean, I was just sort of the assistant, but that was, pre-computer days and still using everything on a typewriter, but that's where I learned the ropes.
So how did you prepare yourself to become the CEO of a symphony?
Well, I think that's a lifelong learning journey and continues to this day.
Well, better yet, how did you get into it and then prepared yourself?
Okay. Well, after coordinating the piano festival for 2 years at Maryland, they came to me, my boss, who was the dean of summer school, and his assistant came to me and said, we'd like to start a summer orchestra program as a model to the School of Music. And I said, well, sure, I'd be happy to do that. I knew the repertoire because I had studied it pretty intensively, so that was not the issue. But I started, they gave me basically a blank sheet of paper. And we started in 1988 something called the National Orchestral Institute, which 30 years later will celebrate its 30th season this June in the College Park campus.
So what are the challenges you faced during this job?
Well, in that job, it was somewhat different because I had to build the orchestra, which meant I traveled all over the country to 16, 17 cities every winter, hearing upwards of 1,000 university students, selecting the 85 who would come to campus for 3 weeks. And the process introduced me to some leading coaches because the people I invited were conductors of basically full-time orchestras. You know, Andy Litton, Joseph Silverstein, David Zinman, Marin Alsop, many people over the years, and even Daniel Hagee came a couple times, our current director here in Wichita. And that was a real learning experience about how an orchestra works, because you learn all the excerpts and you begin to identify like that one has it, that one doesn't, that one can do it. And it was an amazing experience.
So
but,
how had you applied those techniques and those experiences to today's symphony here in Wichita?
Well, that probably not so much, because after I left Maryland for something new, I went to the Grand Teton Music Festival in Jackson Hole, where we stayed for 6 years. And that was really where I started to do the real world application of marketing, fundraising, and management and all of that. Working in a university, as wonderful as it is, doesn't quite have the same realities that we face on the street day to day running a nonprofit.
Right. And from Wyoming?
From Wyoming, we went to, just finally decided I wanted to manage a real orchestra, not just a summertime gig. So I went to Fresno, California, and was there for 6 years. And from there, I came here.
So how has life been for an East Coaster, as yourself, coming from New Jersey to Wichita?
Well, it was a process, and this was the last time zone I hadn't worked in yet, so it was on the bucket list.
You've been trying all of them.
Well, I've tried them all. And so the Central Time Zone seemed to be a good place. And when I came here, what struck me, first of all, the people were wonderful. They had a wonderful music director already in Daniel Hagee, and it was because of my knowledge and friendship with Daniel from years past that I said, if you're at Wichita, I'm interested in this job. And when I came here, it didn't take long for the board to sell me. And just driving around and seeing all the cultural amenities that we have here, which are really, as you know, simply amazing.
Yes.
And when I compared that to where I was coming from, it was really a very simple decision.
Tell us why, in your opinion, is a good symphony orchestra important to any city?
Well, I think for certainly a city of our size, it's one of the cultural flagships. It brings prestige, it brings entertainment. A lot of times when you go to cities like Wichita and Kansas City, Fresno, I mean, we all use these cultural things as selling points. I mean, they are, first of all, quality of life. They give us something of value to do on our weekends. But just as importantly, for a city that's trying to recruit businesses and higher educated employment, having a symphony, having a museum, having the Botanica and music theater, these are the kinds of things that say to somebody, I can raise a family here. And I can not only have entertainment and enrichment, but there are all these other educational aspects of all of these organizations, including the symphony, that my children can benefit from. So that's, I think, why a lot of people come here to raise their family.
Tell us, who do you believe is your favorite composer?
Well, we just finished a concert of John Williams, and that made us a lot of the famous John Williams, and that made us a fair amount of money. So I would say, yeah, okay. I would say, if I'm driving around the city, as I do, I put my CDs in. What I've been listening to quite a lot over the last 2 months is Mozart. Piano concertos, piano sonatas, which to me is, I think that just encompasses life from all angles and all emotions in a way that certainly other composers do, but Mozart, at this point in my life, does it in such a unique and relevant way that I find that very, very enriching.
So how do you separate the art of the symphony from the business of the symphony?
The art basically has to come first. I mean, if you don't have the art, the excellence behind the art, you don't have the integrity that you need to run the business. Therefore, as an example, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we performed Mahler's 7th Symphony. It's probably the most difficult Mahler symphony, not just for the orchestra, but maybe also for the audience. We were the only orchestra in the United States, I think, who performed it this year. But Mahler's symphonies are bread and butter for orchestral musicians. It's important that they play them on occasion for the skill and for the absolutely transcendent experience that the audience who attends gets from it. Now, unfortunately, the audience for that is smaller than it was, or maybe it's never been that large for Mahler. It's always been a specialized niche. But it's important to do that. So what we have to do from the business end is find the balance. And so Pops will do that for us. This John Williams concert completely sold out Century 2. The concert that we did earlier in the year with Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Now, Vivaldi's Four Seasons is 300 years old. So it's been done over and over again. Yes. But for this concert, we decided we'll do something different. We're going to project images of Kansas landscape photography that were done by Larry Schwarm, professor of photography at Wichita State. And these amazing photographs that were cued to the score opened up an entire new window so that suddenly Vivaldi's music has a Kansas connection. So that was very, very popular. And then 2 weeks after that, we collaborated with Music Theater Wichita to present a semi-staged concert version of Carousel, the famous Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. An amazing experience, one of the highlights of my own personal career, for the way that it was pulled off and brought to life on the stage by Wayne Bryan and Daniel Hagee, and all the guest artists that Wayne contracted with. An amazing experience for everybody that was there. So those kinds of things, help keep this thing going.
So describe the community, Wichita, the greater South Central Kansas, or the world without music.
Well, I know personally life would be pretty empty without music. And I think that most people who experience the symphony. And there's as many reasons for its value as there are people listening to it. Mm-hmm. But I think for everybody personally, there's this deep enrichment, on occasion a transcendent experience, and always something that's showing us, if we allow it to work within us, it allows us to see something of our emotions that sometimes words can't define. And what's interesting about this music, and I specifically refer to what we call classical, as broad a topic as that can be, is that it's never one and done. I can listen to a Beethoven symphony or a Mozart piano sonata now in my middle years and experience it entirely differently than I did when I was 20. It's just different.
What causes that change?
We call these things musical works, and work is a verb. Mm-hmm. And so these works work on us, taking our life experiences, the emotions and the feelings and the knowledge of our worldview, whatever it might be, and allows this interchange of active involvement. Now, it's not just the music that's working, we're working with it. If we listen passively, as sometimes we all do, we're guilty of that. Right. But listening passively doesn't accomplish the full potential of the experience. I mean, we'll say that.
So it's basically the frame of reference,
yeah,
which then a matter of interpretation when you're listening to the music.
Absolutely. And if I can tell you a story, a number of years ago when I was still in Fresno, we had a gentleman called me up one day, and he was a mentor to some underprivileged and disadvantaged youth who were working on high school equivalency degrees. And they had a music club for the students earning a B or higher. And they would just get together and talk about music. Mm-hmm. And he called me up and said, we've never been to the Symphony. Could we come? And I said, absolutely. Provided them some tickets. And they showed up and sat and listened to the concert. And a week later, I called him up and said, so, what did you think? And his response was, we loved it. We had no idea. And he said, you have to remember that some of these young people who are maybe 18, 20 years old are coming from families where maybe dad's in prison, mom's a junkie. They may be homeless. They've spent some nights on a park bench. They've never even been downtown, even though they live within a mile of the concert hall. But sitting in that concert hall was a life-changing experience. And one of the young ladies reported, after listening to a Tchaikovsky symphony, and I didn't expect her to experience it on the level that I did, but for her response was, it was the first time in my life I experienced peace. That's a very profound response.
So, would you say all genres of music are equal?
Yes. Yeah, I think one has to be open-minded and fair to say that all genres are valid. They may not be
valid, but not necessarily equal.
Well, they may be equal too, but maybe not to each individual in the same way. There are some kinds of music that I don't listen to. There are obviously lots of people who don't listen to classical music.
So true.
And I'm in the business of classical music, so my focus is on introducing that to people. A friend of mine once said, everybody loves classical music. They just don't know it yet. And, to a certain extent, I think that might be true. But I think, at least for me, that range of music is the most satisfying. Now, one of the things that we are finding is an opportunity to introduce people to the orchestra comes through movie music. If Mozart were alive today, he'd be composing for film scores. So would Verdi, so would Puccini.
Right.
The film score, which is a vast entity of genres, I mean, it covers every kind of music imaginable. But the people like John Williams or Alexander Desplat or Danny Elfman are pulling from those rich traditional resources, injecting them with contemporary sound, whether it's jazz, folk, or other contemporary idioms to satisfy this scene. And we're finding that that's a wonderful introduction to not just children, but adults who haven't yet felt a comfort level with listening to a Mahler symphony, for instance.
So what kind of music don't you like?
I don't know.
Before I ask you your favorite rap song.
I'm not into rap.
I figured that out.
I don't think you'll find me at Hamilton. I'm not sure I get that. I don't listen to a lot of country. I have listened to some. We have presented some at the Symphony. We did the Texas Tenors a few years ago, which is maybe some type of a crossover between pop and country. But next year we're doing some jazz with Byron Stripling coming to do a tribute to Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, you have the total package here for next year.
Yeah, I brought you the whole brochure.
The brochure for next year, Symphony Orchestra. And people can get in touch with the Symphony's office to get one of these, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And tickets are online now as subscriptions. We're not selling singles just yet.
Subscriptions.
So,
and it has a lot of exciting performances coming up.
It's a fantastic season.
Of course.
I can't wait.
You can't wait.
But I want my summer vacation first.
So tell us, what do you do for fun when you're not listening to music or working in music?
Well, even when I'm not working in music, the music is sort of running through my head, so it never really goes away. But I enjoy food and wine a lot. I do a lot of the cooking at home. We have pets, a dog and a cat, so they get a lot of attention. My wife and I like to do, little trips, but not just trips out beyond Wichita. We like to do things in Wichita, whether it's going to the art museum for an afternoon, going to music theater in the summer. We going to the zoo. We never have a lack of things to do here.
So let's play a lightning round.
A lightning round, okay.
And with some short answers. Your favorite food?
Oh, what did we have for dinner last night? I'm sorry. There's too many.
All right. Well, what about your favorite drink, beverage?
Wine.
Wine.
Red or white, depending on what's going with the food.
Your favorite holiday?
Holiday. NCAA's Final Four.
Oh. Your least favorite foods?
My least favorite. I really don't think I've ever found a food that can't be prepared in some interesting way.
Where do you see music going in the future?
Oh, that is, I think it will always be with us because we need it as human beings. I don't know what music will sound like 50 years from now. There'll be evolution, there'll be preservation.
Symphony rock? Symphony.
Well, there are symphony rock shows now, so that's not going to be anything new.
Oh, okay.
There's really,
continue.
I'm not so sure anything. I don't want to say nothing's going to ever be new again, because there always is.
Right.
So I really can't make that prediction. But I've seen a lot change over the years in terms of what symphonies are open to doing.
Right. Okay, my final question. When it is all over, your life is happily ended, and I wish you the longest life possible, how would you like your headstone to read?
I think that in some way that for the lives of all the people I touched with music, that it made a difference to them. And I think back now of the years that I ran the National Orchestral Institute. I did that for 12 years at Maryland, and worked with, gosh, I don't know how many thousands of young orchestra musicians. Many of them have jobs in orchestras today. And one of the most rewarding things for me is to see how that brief time when our lives intersected, that it made some difference. I don't know how much of a difference, but it made enough of a difference to help them launch a career. So that if you look almost at any orchestra roster, personnel roster in this country, I can find 2 or 3 people that came through that program, including even Wichita.
Well, congratulations, and Don Reinhold.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Godspeed.
Pleasure being here.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Well, it was fun.
And I'm so glad you took the time to join us. You can watch this and every episode of One-on-One on demand on the One-on-One page at kpts.org. Also, please email your thoughts and questions about the program, and we may share them with the audience on a future episode. The email address, oneonone@kpts.org. Until then, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'll see you next week for another interesting conversation with someone you may just know. Thanks for watching.
The Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek Trust, supporting arts, history, science, and this program on KPTS.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.